The Memphis Grizzlies lost to the Sacramento Kings on Monday night, snapping what was like a 15-game losing skid for Sacramento. The Grizzlies are tanking. That's not the problem. But there are some things that need to be addressed regarding this Grizzlies team as this season presses onward. We're going to talk about that and the latest on Ja Morant trade discussions coming up on this edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for being with me on this installment of Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, Joe Mullinax, flying solo on this episode of the show. DeMichael Cole doing his beat writer duties for the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. So I'm hanging out with you for the next 30 minutes or so talking Memphis Grizzlies basketball, wherever you're taking in the show on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, YouTube, literally anywhere you get podcasts. Hopefully you're liking, you're commenting, you're rating, reviewing, subscribing, and you're an everydayer to our little corner of the internet we like to call Locked On Grizzlies. Make sure that you are helping us continue to be a proud member of the #1 sports podcast network out there, the Locked On Podcast Network. Support Locked On NBA, support Locked On Grizzlies. All of it is appreciated by myself and my co-host, DeMichael Cole, I can assure you. I can also assure you that that was painful to watch. I watched the game just as you probably did. If you didn't watch it, good for you. That was not the most elite display of NBA basketball that I have ever seen. But before I get to the largest concern that I have about this team, and the pun is somewhat intended there later on here in the show, I'm going to try to be positive. I'm going to focus on the good that came about from this defeat at the hands of the Sacramento Kings. The Kings are now 4-26 on the regular season on the road. One of those 4 wins at the friendly confines of FedEx Forum there in Memphis, Tennessee. One of the positives was the play of Javon Small. And I wrote about it over at On SI in my takeaways piece that I do for them for just about every game when it's not on the weekend or super late when I'm tired. I wrote about how Small has now scored in double digits in 5 of his last 6 games. And in this particular contest, he was the Grizzlies' leading scorer, Javon Small was. 6 of 8 from the field, 4 for 5 from beyond the arc, 5 of 6 from the charity stripe. Small also had 9 assists to only 1 turnovers and 6 rebounds. Javon Small was the best player on the court for the Memphis Grizzlies, and you can make it a legitimate argument that he was the best player on the court, period. Russell Westbrook turned back the clock in this contest, 7 assists, 25 points. So Russ might have something to say since he played for the winning team, but Javon Small looked very comfortable out there. And the Grizzlies have a pretty well-established track record of drafting players in the second round and then eventually converting them to full roster contracts after they spend some time on a 2-way contract. Javon Small seems locked and loaded and primed to be the next Grizzlies player that does just that. He just looks fluid in this environment. And it's important to understand and point out that the Grizzlies are indeed losing. So how much of that is the freedom that comes with the ability to make mistakes, although Small did not make many mistakes in this contest. But when you are playing without the concern, oh no, if we lose, that's what the organization is trying to do. That's not what players are trying to do. And I want to stress as I make jokes throughout this episode about how bad that basketball game was in a variety of ways, that's not on the players. I want to stress that. I think the players competed. I think that they fought their tails off. I think that it's the fact or the argument that Russell Westbrook was the best player on the court in an NBA game in 2026 that tells you all you need to know about what the quality of play was. Nothing to do with the effort, nothing to do with the attitude. Players and coaches don't tank. But the players that are on the court certainly contribute to the product that is eventually on display. And it was not the best product for the Grizzlies in this contest, aside from flashes like Small. I really liked what I saw from Taylor Hendricks. If you're a fan of bigs only getting 3 rebounds in 25 minutes of play, if you hated Jaren Jackson Jr. for that reason, you're probably not going to like Taylor Hendricks if he doesn't turn that around. But I thought that Hendricks Showed some good things offensively, showed a little bit of range, 2 for 5 from beyond the arc, showed a little bit of aggression, trying to get to the line, trying to get to the rim. I liked what I saw from Hendricks. It was good to see Walter Clayton Jr. out there. Walter Clayton Jr. competed admirably, 6 assists. He and Small off the bench did a good job running the offense. 15 total assists between Small and Clayton Jr., only 3 turnovers. That's a 5-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio. You'll take that every day of the week and twice on a Monday night where you just had to watch the Sacramento Kings beat the Memphis Grizzlies. I think that there are reasons to be optimistic. GG Jackson continues to shine, not just because of his scoring like the last time the Grizzlies were tanking it out. And GG was putting up, I believe the term that I used was garbage scoring numbers, not because GG is a garbage scorer, far from it. And he's improved dramatically as a scorer. He's much more efficient this season. His 16 points came on 12 shots. But it also was the fact that GG got 6 rebounds. He and Javon Small were tied on the team with 6 rebounds. And we'll talk more about that 6 rebound number here in a little bit. I think that is where you continue to focus your energy. If you're struggling with the tank, if you are somebody that actually went and saw this game in person, DeMichael Cole texted me a picture from his seat on press row, and I'm guessing you probably weren't one of the people that saw the game in person because that arena looked a third full. And again, it's a Monday night game against the worst team in the NBA, and your team lost. So where is the argument for attending this game? I posted on X at Joe Mullinax, the Grizzlies should start paying fans to come to these games. As we talked about on our last episode of the show, you could have gotten into Grizzlies-Kings with you and your friend, you and your spouse, for $10. That is how this has fallen. It's the product that's on the court. It's an organization that didn't play Kyle Anderson. Knee soreness or whatever the issue was. Didn't play Ty Jerome. Ty Jerome came down with an illness all of a sudden. He was questionable and then he was out. So you had a roster for the Grizzlies in which Olivier Maxence Prosper, GG Jackson, Jalen Wells, Scottie Pippen Jr., and Cam Spencer were your starters. Of those 5, only Jalen Wells was slotted to be an opening day starter for the Memphis Grizzlies. Then you had, coming off the bench, Taylor Hendricks, Jemai Mashak, Javon Small, Walter Clayton Jr., and Rion Rupert, the newest 10-day contract signing of the Grizzlies. We'll talk more about him in our next episode. And he looked good in the flashes that he played. 9 rebounds from a guard. You'll take that. I struggle, and he's a bigger guard. That's important to point out at 6'7". I struggle with speaking with you and trying to give you the reasons on the court to be excited for what you're about to watch for the next 2 months-ish of basketball. We all understand the stakes. Trying to get as good of odds in the NBA draft lottery as you can to take a swing at a superstar talent, and this draft continues to look ripe with superstar talent. That's wonderful. That doesn't help you in February. That's something once this season is over, you can look ahead to May in the NBA draft lottery. You can look ahead to June's draft. You can start really diving into prospects and thinking about what the future of the Memphis Grizzlies is. But it's hard to have that macro 40,000-foot view when your eyes just saw what you saw if you watched Grizzlies-Kings on Monday night. Yes, Javon Small looked good. GG Jackson continues to show growth. That is where you hang your hat if you're a Grizzlies organization trying to find the positive in your current state. Because there's going to be a lot of losing. And I mean a lot of losing. The Grizzlies host Golden State on Wednesday night. We'll talk about that game on our next episode of the show as well. It's probably going to be a loss. And then the game after that is probably going to be a loss. And they're going to keep mounting. You have to do your best to find those individual performances, those rays of light in the dark cloud. Otherwise, the tank is going to run you over, and it's going to be a really brutal end to this season for you. Hopefully, you're going to Count on us here at Locked On Grizzlies to be a little bit more of a ray of sunshine in your tanking day. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we are going to discuss what I think the biggest, pun intended, question is facing the Memphis Grizzlies right now. Stick around here on Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position that you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure is on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, skills, experience, location, so that you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute or so that I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners to this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now. Support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Locked On Grizzlies. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Get Locked On Grizzlies ad-free with the Everydayer Club, plus members-only Discord access. Make sure you're joining at lockedongrizzlies.supercast.com. That is lockedongrizzlies.supercast.com. Memphis doesn't have a legitimate big man. I stand corrected. Zach Edey exists, but he is not playing right now, and he almost certainly will not play the remainder of the season with the stress reaction in his leg. So, yes, the Grizzlies do technically have a big on the roster, and the guy who kind of gets forgotten in all of these conversations of eras being moved on from, Brandon Clark, is still on the roster, but that's another guy who's still several weeks away from returning, and at this stage, doesn't really make sense for him to return. That's a fair question to ask. The Grizzlies need a big, and the fact that they signed a guard on that two-way contract, as we were talking about a moment ago, Rupert, the fact that he was the choice instead of another big, tells you that maybe Memphis is expecting a Zach Edey or a Brandon Clark at some point, or maybe they are just throwing a bunch of guards and wings out on the court and seeing what the heck happens, because those are the guys that they think actually have a chance to be a part of their long-term process here in Memphis. But here is where I have a problem with that. You are having Olivier Max's Prosper. You are having Gigi Jackson. You are having Jemai Mashak. They are all doing things as bigs that you should not be asking them to do. You are asking OMP to essentially be a starting center. And sure, he had 17 points on 9 shot attempts, a very efficient offensive night. But you'll notice that I didn't talk about him earlier in the show as the things that I thought were positives from the contest, because he only had 3 rebounds in 25 minutes of play. So if you're mad at Taylor Hendricks, a big, arguably the actual big of all of them, OMP is 6'7", playing center. This isn't Draymond Green walking through the door. We can't be frustrated at somebody like OMP struggling in that space when he is being asked to be something that he's not. Same thing with Mashak. Mashak is 6'3". Why are we asking Mashak to play a big man position? Why are we looking to him to be somebody that can do both perimeter work as a defender, which is he is one of the better defenders in the NBA. The rest of his game needs to come along. But you watch that young man play, and he plays with an effort and a tenacity and aggression. You see why the Grizzlies liked him in the draft process. But he's not a big. OMP's not a big. Gigi Jackson, as much as I dream of him being a 6'9", 225-pound combo forward like a Carmelo Anthony back in the day, that's not the best use of him right now. Being a 4-5, he should be a 3/4. That should be Gigi. And none of these guys are getting the chance to fully be what they are capable of being. And I was told, and I believe this to be true, that the purpose of a tank is not just to maximize your opportunity at elite talent. Another reason that you tank is you look at the young players that are on your roster currently, and you try to figure out if they're going to be around the next time that you're actually trying to be good. And Gigi Jackson stands out as the one who's the most likely to be in that conversation. Again, 6'9", 220 pounds, 21 years old in his third year in the NBA. He has elite talent. And I do mean elite. And to Gigi's credit, DeMichael has talked about it both on the commercial appeal and here on the podcast. Gigi's getting better. He's refining that talent. He's applying it more effectively and more efficiently, especially on the offensive end. He is not the defensive liability that he has been in the past. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows in this game for Gigi. He had one of the worst plus-minus marks in the game. But over the larger sample size of the season, you can see the real improvement that Gigi Jackson has made on both ends of the floor, along with that scoring talent that he's had since the day he walked through the door of the National Basketball Association and the Memphis Grizzlies. What is Gigi Jackson getting out of the current situation, aside from getting a chance to play NBA basketball, when he is not being put in a space where he actually is going to play if and when this team is ever good again? And I say if and when, of course the Grizzlies will be good again, but it's, again, I can't, that game hurt me to watch at times. It hurt. The Grizzlies had 24 rebounds 2 minutes into the fourth quarter. So we're talking 38 minutes of NBA basketball played, and the Grizzlies at that point, I should say, only had 24 rebounds. The Sacramento Kings, it's not like they lit the world on fire from three. But you know what Sacramento did? They shot really well from inside of three. They were effective at the rim because the Grizzlies didn't have rim protection. And what do you want from your bigs? You want the ability to protect the rim, and you want the ability to clean the glass. Zach Edey can do both of those things. And Zach Edey's there, Joe. He's just not playing. I get it. But if you're trying to evaluate these young players, you have to give them the best chance to show what they can do. Why would you ever try to analyze what Jemai Meshack is doing when he's playing the 4 or the 5? That's not what he is in the NBA. OMP is fighting for his NBA life on two-way contracts, trying to earn a full roster contract. He's not a center. He's not a big. He's a combo forward. You're putting him in a position where he's more likely to fail. And that bothers me. Because, again, the tank is not about the players that are on the court. They are doing their damnedest. They may not be playing for the name across their chest, the lore and love of that idea. They just watched Jaren Jackson Jr. get traded away a couple weeks ago. That's probably out the window if they thought that way before. Maybe they're not playing for the Grizzlies organization, but in a very human and selfish way, they're playing for themselves. You have numerous players that are fighting for their NBA lives. OMP, Meshack, Small, guys that aren't on first-round pick contracts or didn't sign an extension in the offseason. These are guys that are trying to show what they can do. How can you get a realistic picture when your roster is this imperfect? When you don't have the means to rebound at a high clip consistently? When you don't have the capacity to defend the rim? Memphis has to do something at the big man position. Whether it's Brandon Clark coming back, whether it's Zach Edey coming back at some point, and they have a long-term vision for this, there has to be some sort of answer because you are not getting a read on what the players, especially in Javon Small, Gigi Jackson, those types of guys. If you think they might legitimately be end of rotation, in the case of Gigi, maybe a little better than that, guys that can help you compete in the National Basketball Association, you should be doing everything in your power to acquire as much data and as much tape as you can of them doing the things that you're going to want them to do the next time the Grizzlies are actually good. And how is that possible when you don't have a legitimate big on the roster? That is the biggest, pun intended, problem facing the Memphis Grizzlies right now. Their roster imbalance. Not only is the losing hard, it feels directionless in terms of the current roster because you are not maximizing the reps that you're getting to try to see what these players are capable of. That has to be changed. Let me know on X at Joe Mullinax. Hit me up in the comments. How are you feeling about my concern with this roster? Again, the losing is not the problem. It's the way that it's happening in terms of the way the roster is currently constructed that really bothers me. They need a legitimate big one way or another. Hopefully it happens soon. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, going to close out this edition of the show. Jake Fisher of the Stein line with Mark Stein talking about the Ja Morant trade. It's going to get worse before it gets better. Stick around here on Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here is how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right, flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. You got to love futures this time of year, right? Whether it's picking a team to win the championship or grabbing a conference title, it adds that extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now, not only can your pick cash, but it can also send you to the NBA Finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started right now. Use your profit boost on an NBA future, then get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. Finishing up this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, it is I, Joe Mullinax, very happy to be here with you on this edition of the show. Ja Morant. The issue with Ja continues to kind of fester and not necessarily be something that the team is inviting, or not necessarily be something that we can look at and say, oh, well, it's on Ja. Ja's being a distraction. Ja's being a negative. It's not that kind of party, right? But it is something that is going to continue to be a distraction as long as there's NBA reporters. And Jake Fisher of the Stein line posted recently in his Substack newsletter with Mark Stein about Ja not having much of a trade value, no matter how seriously the Grizzlies explored it during the trade deadline season. The teams that DeMichael and I had discussed here on the show were the ones that were in the mix, according to Fisher. And again, this is Mark Stein's Substack. I highly suggest you subscribe if you don't already do so. Sacramento only ever showed modest interest. I'm told Miami, this is Fisher, I'm told Miami too only inquired about Morant with the idea of trading him in a deal similar to Washington's asset-light acquisition of Trae Young. The Grizzlies will have to try again this summer to find a palatable Morant deal. Maybe they'll have more options like the Bucks. It was rumored that the Bucks were another team that was legitimately interested in Giannis at the deadline. Maybe they'll have more options. The prospect of Milwaukee trading for Morant, multiple teams came away from the deadline thinking that the Bucks' interest was real, whether to install him as their eventual successor to Antetokounmpo, or they believe they could actually make a Giannis and Ja pairing work. This is not going away, is the point that I have been trying to make. And the confusion around the situation is one of the things that on a recent episode, I think a couple shows back, I tried to say to DeMichael, and DeMichael wasn't following me. A couple of you in the comments hit me up and said, I get what you're saying, Joe. There's a disconnect here. There's a disconnect. And maybe it's a public disconnect. Maybe it is a private one. Maybe it's a combination of both. But you have Cedric Coward coming out, allegedly one of the future faces of the franchise, at least in the short term, until you get that big-time star. If you don't think Coward can be that, maybe he can be. And he comes out and vehemently supports Ja Morant, talking about how you should stop talking if you don't see Ja in a positive light, essentially. I'm paraphrasing there. And, of course, Cedric Coward is going to defend his teammate. We talked about that in that conversation with DeMichael. The point that I was trying to make, and I'll try to rephrase it here as well, if the young players on the team are going to come out and say this guy is valuable, and if we're going to continue to see reports from very credible sources like Fisher of the Stein line talking about how the market for Ja was limited, and they're hoping, fingers crossed, that the market's going to be better this summer. But if Ja doesn't play, how is that possible? You hope that he will. There's a reevaluation coming up in a couple of weeks. But what are the odds of that reevaluation as the month goes from February to March? 5 or 6 weeks away from the end of the season, what are the odds that they just shut Ja down? And how does Ja's trade value improve? How do you change the circumstances of what you're dealing with if you can't even build a 10-game sample size showing that Ja is what he can be still as a top 15 or 20 NBA player? He can't do that sitting on the bench. So in what universe would the offers improve? So if the offers don't improve and the young players on your team love the guy, why are you talking about trading him in the first place? There's a disconnect. And that is where the distraction comes from. Not from Ja being a discontent or a malcontent on the bench, not being a supporter of his teammates. He hasn't shown any of that. We know that there might be some issues with the coaching staff going back to earlier in the season. We would imagine there's at least awkwardness between the front office and the Morant camp. How do you make the connection between a player that doesn't have as much value as he once did, that you have under contract for 2 years, and we got to move on and turn the page on this era? I struggle with that. I struggle with the fact that Jaren Jackson Jr. is no longer here, and he's the guy that actually played. He's the guy that was a great representative of the organization. He was the guy that would have made a tank a heck of a lot more palatable. And you can make a reasonable argument that Jaren Jackson Jr. had to be traded because the value of Ja Morant in such a transaction has been negated so much. How do you turn the page while the face of that era is still sitting on the bench? How do you reconcile the cognitive dissonance of trying to listen to trade offers again over the summer for a player that doesn't hold the value that Jaren Jackson Jr. did in a trade in particular, while you have players that are supposed to be a part of your future foundation actively saying that he's a great guy, and why would you move on from this guy in theory? That's a major issue, to me at least. And it's not Ja's fault that it's an issue. To me, it's the front office's fault that he's still here. At some point, you got to bite the bullet. And if you want to move on from an era, you can't have your cake and eat it too. The Ja Morant that you are trading is not the Ja Morant that you are valuing. So you need to divert your energy. You either need to try to reconcile and get Ja on your side, and that alters your draft philosophy a little bit, or you move on from the era regardless of what you're going to get back. You tried to have a 2-timeline philosophy and it failed. Learn the lesson. You've chosen the tank. You've chosen to turn the page. It's hard to say that's happening when the guy that is at least partially responsible for that page having to be turned in the first place is sitting there on the bench, again, not being a discontent or a malcontent, not being a cancerous figure, but clearly he's not somebody that you think should be a part of the organization anymore if you're the Memphis Grizzlies front office. So why is he still here? Where these questions and these reports and these things can continue to fester and create tension for fans, and maybe eventually, as the losses mount, in a frustrated locker room. Thanks so much for being with me on this edition of Locked On Grizzlies. It is much appreciated. The next time that we're together, we'll talk Grizzlies Golden State Warriors. We'll talk about the newest 10-day contract signee for the Grizzlies. Lots of different content. DeMichael will be back with us. Make sure you're here next time our episode drops. Make sure you're following me on X at Joe Mullinax. Make sure you are liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, YouTube. Literally any of those spots works great. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Grizzlies ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to this link, lockedongrizzlies.supercast.com. That's lockedongrizzlies.supercast.com to join the club. For those of you on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 national NBA YouTube channel. On audio, make sure you make your second listen NBA game night on Locked On NBA. Thank you so much for being with me on this edition of the show. Can't wait to have you back next time. Until then, make sure you're staying locked in. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. Have a great rest of your day. See ya.